Okay, so I've been arguing with Hypocrite all day on Twitter. Told him to call me, so we're gonna talk. I guess let's see how this goes. I'm sure it will be cancerous, but we're gonna try to be, nice and friendly here. Hello?
Hello?
Hello? I saw you hang up just the second I was ready there. What's up, LP?
Not much. How's it going, man?
Oh, pretty good. Somewhat frustrated with you, but I'm gonna try to be very calm and friendly, and you're gonna
I
try to
appreciate that. I
answer.
appreciate that.
Okay, I thank you. And you're gonna try to actually answer questions. Can we agree about that?
Well, I have my own questions to ask, though. That's a two-way street.
Right. Wait, but I play by a fair rule of if we're on a specific question, right? There's a debate proposition, and you try to ask me something that I can't see the relevance of. It's fair for me to question the relevance. And if you can't spell it out, then it's not fair for you to insist on humoring that because that's a red herring. And that's the two-way street that I'm fine with you holding me to. You can't just bring up random shit that you can't show has to be understood to understand the question on the table and then insist that we talk about it.
That seems reasonable.
Okay. So, let's go get your argument. 1 second. I'm going to dig it up. Unless you want to try to reconstruct it. I assume we're still going to work with the first argument. We're going to talk about the first premise and why I don't think it makes sense. Unless you
Right.
want to create a whole new argument.
No, well, let's just stick with what we got.
Okay, so you're going to have to wait for a second. While I dig this up, let me just dig up this video. Do you have a camera? People will probably appreciate a camera, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to.
I'm like streaming on OBS, so my
Oh,
camera's there.
they remedied that on Discord. I can actually run Discord in Oh, wait, but are you using old school OBS? I'm looking for the thing while we're doing all this. Are you using old school OBS or are you
Yeah, I'm
using
using the
slobs?
no, I'm using the old one.
Yeah.
I don't use it normally. Like I do everything through StreamYard normally now. That's my preference.
Fair enough. I have all my shit set up for Discord. 1 second. Okay. Hypocrite comes back with new argument. Here we go. And now I just have to find some point in this video when the argument is on the screen, which I think is near the end. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So I guess what makes sense here? Why don't... Oh, God. I thought that was you talking to me, but it's in the video. Okay. So I've got it up on my screen, and I guess I'll screen share to you so we're looking at the same thing, okay?
Okay.
Okay, there's nothing weird on this fucking screen, is there? Okay. Yeah, so there. All right, so I'm sharing with you. So this is just the video. This is our second conversation, okay? And the argument is right there. I backed up a second and heard myself screaming at you. Okay, so my problem with the first premise, I'm just going to paste an image here, okay?
hmm
So this is the issue that I'm taking, okay? So let's just go through the argument first, okay? So premise one, and I hope you don't mind I'm talking a bunch right now, but this is just to lay out the argument. I'm not even making an argument right now. So
Sure.
if transgender women, by definition, believe they are women, and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. Transgender women, by definition, this is premise two, by definition, believe they are women, and it's false that they are women. Conclusion, therefore, transgender women are delusional. So that's all valid, that's fine. And then the second argument is it's pretty trivial. It's just to get from transgender women to, all trans people. Premise one, if transgender women are delusional, it's conclusion of the first argument, then by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. Transgender women are delusional, premise two. Conclusion, therefore, by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. So then we're at all trans people are delusional. So I have an issue to take. Do you have anything to say before I do that?
I mean, I might want to tweak the language a little bit, knowing how pedantic you are and how much you worry about semantics. I might change the wording of transgender women believe they are women to transgender women have a sense of identity other than male.
Okay. Now, if we want to tweak, I'm going to probably just need to write it out fresh. Because it's going to be hard to keep tweaks in our minds. So that'll just take a minute to do. And I am pedantic. I don't think I'm unfairly pedantic. But what I don't have a problem with is someone saying, actually, I'm not satisfied with what I just said. I don't stand by this anymore. I'm going to give a different version. If you acknowledge that you're just giving up on what you said initially and switching to a new thing, which you think better represents your view, that's fine. The kind of things that annoy me are when, for example, someone tries to keep defending the same shit when you've clearly pointed out a problem and tries to treat it like they've reformulated when they haven't. That will annoy me. But yeah, if you want to reformulate, let's do that. So, premise one, here we go. If transgender women, how do you want to phrase it? What do you want to say?
Well, let me pull up the definition of transgender again. If we're going to do this, we may as well do it right.
Go crazy. But keep in mind that when I use the word transgender, I'm referring to someone whose gender and sex differ. So if you have an argument that shows delusion, but which equivocates on transgender, then you're not actually addressing my position. Do you appreciate that?
Well, your position is like meaningless to me.
Okay, but whether my position is meaningful is a separate question. Okay, this is another thing that frustrates me talking to you is the red herrings get stacked in these big layers. Okay, so we can write that down if you want, whether my position is meaningful, but that wasn't what I just asked you. Let me remember what it was that I just asked you. I asked you if you understand that if you give an argument that equivocates on transgender, that is to say, uses a different definition than the one that I'm using, then you're not attacking my position.
Well, why do I have to be attacking your position? I thought my argument is just my position.
Well, you don't have to be attacking my position, but then don't say there's anything wrong with my position.
What's wrong is the definitions that you're using.
Well, wait, but that's a separate claim, though. What's supposed to be wrong is I don't think it's true that all transgender people are delusional. You think that is true, right? So I'm just taking agnostic on that, is what I should really say, right? I'm going to be agnostic, and you're trying to establish that that is true. Now,
right. But it's true, but we have to use the right definitions, right, of what a transgender person is.
Right, but if you're trying to establish that it's true under a different definition, right, then you're not actually
the correct definition.
Okay, but we can talk about that in 1 second, right? That's another thing. So I'm gonna have to write out the red. Actually, I'll leave you to remember the red herrings. I don't have an interest in writing them out. But there's one about whether my position is meaningful. There's one about whether I'm using the correct definition. There's one about like knowing what gender is. There's a lot of red herrings that you use. But I just want to be clear, right? So if you are gonna make some argument that shows that transgenderism is a delusion, but you don't use the same definition as me, you're not attacking my position when I say transgenderism isn't a delusion, or I'm not convinced it is, right?
Well, why don't we just argue about the definition of transgenderism then?
We can do that, but you have to grant this first, right? Because what I was expecting, right, in all of these discussions is for you to show me that what I take a transgender person to be, that such a person is necessarily going to be delusional. The whole category of them are delusional, okay? Now, let's just be clear. Using the definition that I use, which I take to be the standard definition, but that's a separate question. The definition I use, which is someone whose gender and sex differ, do you hold the view that all of those people are delusional?
No, I hold the view that that's a meaningless concept because there's no such thing as gender.
Okay, that's a separate thing, and we can talk about whether there's such thing as gender. There's so many red herrings. We can talk about that too. But
I would love to talk about that.
Now I heard you say no, but you were so quick to move to gender is meaningless that it just didn't really sink in for me. Okay, so I just want to really make sure. Using my definition of transgenderism, which is just someone whose gender and sex differ, you don't hold the view that that entire category of people are delusional.
Sorry, people were complaining about my audio, and I was like, can you just repeat that?
That's fine. If you have to tweak it, we can do audio stuff. Are you good?
I think so.
Okay, so all I want is just a really clear concession on this. I don't want it to waffle into another point, so I can't really appreciate if you clearly answered, right? According to my definition, right, where trans just means someone whose gender and sex differ, do you hold the view that all transgender people are delusional?
So I will grant that according to that definition, no, but under protest, with prejudice and under protest, because that's not what a transgender person is, and that's like a meaningless thing to say. Sex and gender differ doesn't mean anything.
Okay, now
it's like saying your sex and your fashion differ.
Now, if you've so I just want it to be heard for the whole world, so everyone who watches this and watches the ongoing conversation, right? According to my definition, which again I take to be the standard one, but we can discuss that, the definition where transgender is someone whose gender and sex differ, IHIP does not hold the view that all of these people are delusional. Okay. Now,
that's not what a transgender person is, though. I really have to be firm on that.
Okay. Well, we can now talk about some of these other red herrings, but I just can't emphasize it enough. You do concede that, right? Loud and clear?
Yeah, okay. You got me on that one.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so, I mean, do I get to select the red herring, or do you want to? Because the one that interests me the most is the one where some definition is, like, correct. But if you want to talk about the one about meaning or the one about epistemology or whatever,
the most important thing for us to have a meaningful conversation is to try to find an agreement on what a transgender person is. Or I don't know if we're going to be able to agree, but we have to like try to hammer out the definition here. That seems like the most important thing to me.
Okay. I don't quite know what you mean by that. Are you suggesting that there is a definition that is the correct definition?
Yes.
Okay. And what does it mean for a definition to be correct?
It means that you're using language correctly.
Okay. What does it mean to use language correctly? That the things you're describing are actually the things that you're describing. This is kind of a weird. Now I know this might seem esoteric, right? But it's actually kind of important, and I will in good faith to you explain the problem here. I will even at this point
to explain it to me, man.
Sure. And I will even at this point stop calling these things red herrings, because now it's not the case that we're discussing these while the initial topic is being avoided. Now these are the topics, so I shouldn't actually call them red herrings anymore, although previously they were red herrings. So, the whole problem is when you say something's correct, it's got to be clear correct with respect to what, right? Like correctness is with respect to something. So it's not clear what a definition is clear with respect to, on your view, right? And it seems like the kind of problem you're probably going to get into, if you want me to say more about it, is like you're going to get into a thing where you're trying to come up with some sense in which it's correct, and it's like, what, correct with respect to popular opinion, correct with respect to like how IHIP wants to use the words. And none of those things are going to amount to a logical incoherence, like a contradiction or something on the part of the person who's using the word, quote, incorrectly, right? If the correctness thing isn't about logic or like, it's not about like logical possibility or physical possibility or something like that, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a meaningful sense of correct or incorrectness that you're going to be able to invoke there. So that's like the real problem underlying.
Okay, well, let me say this. We agree that language should be useful, ideally, right? That it should serve a purpose.
Well, what whether it
No,
should
we
be.
we can't
No,
agree that language should be useful and that it should help us communicate and get things done, and that therefore we should have.
it's not that we can't agree. It's just that when you use words like should, those carry philosophical baggage that I'm just not sure you appreciate. So like if the idea is like when we say a should, or does should just mean like I have a preference for this thing? Because sure, I have a preference for language to be useful. If that's what you mean when you say
Me too.
language should, yeah. So if that's all you mean, I'm happy to agree with that. Yeah, I have a preference for language being useful. And what was the other one you asked? Useful and what?
Just that we should be able to use it to communicate ideas that we mutually understand.
Yeah,
Ideally, right?
I have a preference for language to be able to do that. Sure.
Okay, so if I'm talking about a cube, but in my mind I'm picturing a sphere, and you don't know that, that's going to be a problem, right? So I would be using the wrong definition of cube if I'm picturing a sphere and actually trying to talk about a sphere, but saying cube.
Now,
So that's what it means for a definition to be wrong, is if the word you're using doesn't apply to the thing that you're talking about.
Okay. Now, okay, so there's a bit of weirdness there. So when you talk about the sphere and the cube, it sounds so. First of all, the problem I have is I'm not totally clear what the definition, what the meaning of wrong is here, and the meaning you just gave seems a little at odds with that hypothetical. So like the hypothetical is one person, both people are using the word cube, but one of them takes cube to refer to sphere, and one of them takes cube to refer to the thing that we all think a cube refers to.
Right.
So I appreciate when you say there's a problem. I take a problem to mean that we have a desire to communicate and we're not fulfilling that desire because we're like talking past each other. So if that's what a problem means, I would agree that there's a problem. But when does it just annoy you that I'm just being specific? Is that bothersome?
It's like, dude, it's like talking
you like philosophy,
to
do you?
I
You
don't like it as much as you, I guess. I like it, but I'm not to the level where we have to define a problem as if we don't both know what a problem is. You know what I mean? I feel like this is laborious, to be honest. I feel like this is unnecessarily laborious.
Okay,
And that it doesn't have to take this long for us to have the conversation. I guess that's what I'm feeling right now.
Okay, well, if you want to know my point of view, I mean, I know that you think I'm just some insane autistic person, right? That's fine. But if you want to know why I care about a lot of these things, it's because they carry baggage that you don't realize they carry because you're not a fucking philosophy nerd, right? It's like
sure
who yeah, right. And I think you should be able I guess if you say sure, I don't even need to emphasize the point, but I was just going to say you'd be able to appreciate this when you're talking to someone who's like not in politics and they invoke like political words or something, and you're like, well, fuck, that has a lot of baggage. Like I know the kind of people who are associated with that, or the kind of ideas there, and like they don't even know it, but they're invoking it. I can't exactly sign off on that. Like it's the same thing. It's just happening with philosophy. So surely
I guess so.
Right?
I guess so.
So yeah, because problem, again, it gets into this whole thing about like norms, like what's it a problem with respect to? It's like when someone uses a word like necessary, what's it necessary with respect to? Or ought, like ought with respect to what? Like it's kind of like this, the thing it's with respect to isn't clarified. So I'm not sure what I'm signing off on when I say we ought do it or it is a problem or whatever. So all I'm doing is clarifying the norm. Like if the norm is we want to have like a conversation where we understand what the other guy's saying, then yeah, it's at odds with our goals. There's a problem. So, you know, pedantic or not, I'm just clarifying. And I agree, if under that understanding, that it's a problem. Now, there's something further than whether it's a problem. Oh, yeah. So then your definition, I don't remember exactly what you said, but I couldn't quite understand from the example. It seems like all you're talking about is two people having a different concept in their head. That doesn't allow me to tell who's right and who's wrong. It seems like the definition of rightness, or whatever your meaning is, it has to be able to do that. It has to be able to tell us like which person is right and which person is wrong when they use a word differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and if at any point you think, okay, actually this is more of a problem than I appreciated, I don't have an answer to that, I will completely respect that, and we can just...
Well, I mean, my answer in regards to language would be that we should defer to the dictionary.
Okay, but then all you mean when you're talking about wrongness, if wrongness means not the dictionary definition, then all you're saying is that they're not using the word in the dictionary. And remember how I said that that's not going to be that powerful a thing to invoke, because they can just go, okay, well, what I'm saying is logically coherent, right? So why do what should motivate me to like care about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the ability to communicate cohesively and with like efficiently. That's the word I was looking for. The ability to communicate with people efficiently, I guess.
Okay, so what it means for a definition to be correct is that it's the definition we find in the dictionary. And of course, there's multiple definitions in the dictionary, but whatever. This definition of correct is at least enough to exclude some definitions. Now, I would just say that I don't personally like. Oh wait, but then you gave an argument for why we should care about correctness. We should care about it because it like facilitates communication. So I agree that generally speaking, a kind of shared language that we have like kind of like formalized in some way, like in a dictionary, that's going to be a useful thing. So I'm not gonna fight you on that. I'll go with that. But it also, I don't think I'd make a categorical statement there, because we need room at the edges for like when new terms are created, or when we have to revise one of our concepts because some further kind of investigation has like revealed a problem with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm basically saying, generally speaking, yeah, I'm pretty fine with like, let's use the dictionary. We should use the dictionary. But I wouldn't make like a categorical statement there. And I'd also just add, I don't think I have to really go out of the scope of the dictionary. Like if there's a dictionary entry about transgender, I'm probably just going to be using like that. That's going to be basically what I'm using. So you follow the kind of like threefold response there. It's like,
yep.
Yes, generally I agree we should. There's edge cases. And I just additionally, I think that if there's a definition of trans, like that would be very close to exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, so can we read the definition of trans and then see if we can agree to this or not? So, denoting or relating to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex.
It's it's a little weirdly phrased. I don't know, where are you reading that from? This is just Google definition.
Yeah.
So sense
of
personal...
that's from like the Oxford Dictionary, I believe.
Yeah, it's a little weirdly imprecise. I'm pretty fine with it. It's just the one weird bit is it said that someone whose sense of personal identity and gender differs from their birth sex. I would just take it to be someone whose gender differs, because there's aspects of personal identity that can differ from birth sex that like don't really have anything to do with gender. But I guess you could still say if it's their personal identity and gender, and gender
if you're a man who identifies as a woman, sorry to interrupt, but if you're a man who identifies as a woman, then that's your personal identity is to be female or to be a woman, right?
Yeah,
like
I'm just so yeah. So the only problem, which maybe it's not a problem, when it says
like your gender is part of your identity.
Yeah. So
right.
Yeah. So if as long as we're not getting into some weird thing where you can have some other like non-gender related aspect of your personal identity be different and then you're a different gender. Like just to be clear, when it says personal identity and gender, right? The thing I'm focusing on there is gender, and the only extent to which I'm concerned with personal identity is the extent to which it is about gender. So
okay.
And I would say that is extraordinarily close to the way I phrase it, which is just someone whose gender and sex differ. So do you see some meaningful difference between how it's spelled out there and how I say it?
Well, yeah. So first of all, it's explicit that this has to be your personal sense of your gender and identity, right? So like, for example, something you said previously was that a person could be transgender and not know that they're transgender, but that is excluded from this definition by this definition.
I don't think so, because I don't think that that sense has to involve an explicit belief that what was it, an explicit belief that they are of the other sex? I forget the exact conversation we had, but they don't even have to have an explicit belief about the gender, right? They could have the identity sense. Maybe that's about like what kind of things they do, that they're drawn to, how they like well, I guess expression is a bit different, but it can kind of talk about their internal like orientation or something like this, and it doesn't have to actually refer specifically to a belief that they hold about their gender, right? Sense of personal identity isn't the same thing as belief about gender or belief about sex.
Well, no, so like what you said is a person can be transgender and not know it.
Right. So belief is required for knowledge. So if I say they don't have to have a belief, then it follows they don't have to have knowledge, right? So they don't. So you could have someone who has that sense of personal identity, right? We could talk about what exactly that is, but they don't have an explicit belief about their gender. They just have again just
no. But so if I am a man and my sense of identity is that I'm a woman, then I can't not know that about myself. I can't not know that I have this conflict.
Okay, so the problem we're going to get into is the difference between what like sense might mean and what beliefs are. So, I mean, again, I'm going to annoy you with philosophy stuff, but like a belief we would generally think of as like a propositional attitude. Like, what this will make sense once we like go through it. You know what a proposition is, right? Like, the sky is blue, I, Hypocrite, and Ask Yourself are talking productively, at least for now. I am transgender, right? A proposition is something capable of being true or false. Something like lamp isn't a proposition. That's a noun. Something like, how are you? That's not a proposition. That's a question. So a belief is like an attitude about a proposition. And we'll just assume like bivalence here about, it's either true or false. A belief is an attitude about a proposition that it's true or false. Do you have a problem with that construal of belief?
No.
Like if I ask you a belief, like, what do you believe it's raining right now? Yes or no? You're saying either like it's true or it's false that it's raining outside right now. It's just your attitude, true or false about a proposition. Okay. And if for some reason that becomes problematic, we can revise it. But that's like pretty standard in philosophy. Okay. So when we talk about a sense, it's not clear that sense entails explicit belief. So that's the problem that I'm raising when you try to go from that definition that talks about sense to explicit belief.
So a sense, if you're not aware of something, then you don't have a sense of it. You have to be aware of it for it to be something that you sense.
Well, I think that awareness. I mean, I think I don't know that there's a distinction between being aware and sensing. I guess sensing is a certain kind of awareness, but yeah, I mean that seems like okay enough. I'm not really taking issue with that. I'm just saying like
right. So you couldn't be unaware of the fact that you have this internal conflict.
You could be unaware of the truth value of the proposition my gender is female or my gender is male, and you could still have that kind of gender identity, that sense, right, where it's like you the kind of things you like to do are the kind of things that biological females, for example, typically like to do, right? The kind of like, I don't know if you want to talk about your mannerisms. I guess expression is a different thing. I tend to sort of sometimes go back and forth between them, but there's also obviously your kind of expression of that gender. But expression, let's not get into that. I think that's technically off topic. So yeah, the sense of identity, it doesn't have to be that explicit belief my gender is X, right? It can just be maybe it's just a general affinity, right? Which is not a belief, an affinity for certain like modes of being, right?
No, because but it's your sense of identity as it relates to your gender, right? So I'm a female. That's what that means.
No, but that's just reasserting the claim. I'm saying I'm not seeing why that's the case, right? Like it's not clear to me that sense entails explicit belief.
I mean, I would say that it does.
Just for the record, I just want to say, I was someone who made videos calling transgenderism a delusion, and who like harped on this, right? Like I was on your side with this issue, and I got completely brutalized on this topic by a philosophy PhD. It was humbling. Okay, so that's why I've changed my view. You can do the same thing. You can just
Sure.
because I hear you actually reacting to things I'm saying, which I appreciate. You're like, fuck, okay, there's a problem there. Like that was what I took that side to be. If you actually start seeing the puzzle here, then it's fine to just change the view on this, right? And I will not go. I will if you change your view, I will never fucking make fun of you again for the silly things you've said on this topic. I promise you. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Let me ask you this. In the very first time we talked about this, you said that if a person believes they're a fire hydrant, then that's delusional, right?
Okay. Before going into that, which yes, I did say that, but before going into that, I know this frustrates you. I want to close off this topic. So when we say the sense of because it's not fair for you to open all these cans of worms and then I do what I think is basically shutting the can of worms, right? And then you move to something else instead of acknowledging it's shut, and then it lingers there in the minds of a lot of people as like a point that you potentially scored, right? You would acknowledge that you don't actually have some kind of argument that shows that sense entails explicit belief, right? Like, at least currently, you don't have an argument for that. Is that fair? And then we can move to whatever your other one is.
Well, my argument is that that's what I take it to mean.
That sense means explicit belief?
So one of the definitions of sense in the dictionary here is a feeling that something is the case. She had the sense of being a political outsider.
Okay, a feeling that something is the case. That was weird for a reason I won't say, but yeah, feeling is also distinct from a belief, though, right? Like a feeling is not a belief. A feeling is not a propositional attitude.
Well, it's like a belief with less conviction. That's all it really, right? It's just not a really strongly conviction belief.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, I shouldn't have said it's not a propositional attitude. I guess I wasn't thinking about that clearly enough. But it's not, a feeling isn't an attitude about the truth or falsity of a proposition. That's distinct from a belief. A feeling is not a belief. It's a different.
Yeah, but it's not just a feeling. It's a feeling that something is the case.
But that now you're just talking about a belief again, right? And that's not what.
That's the definition of sense. That's what I'm telling you. So sense is like in this context is like a synonym for belief. That's what I'm trying to get at.
The definition of sense that you read, it used the word feeling, right? It said
a feeling that something is the case.
Okay, so that something is the case.
So maybe you're not totally sure it's correct, but you are aware that you have this idea, you have this inclination or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the weirdness is it says feeling, but then that something is the case does sound propositional, because like a proposition is the only thing that can be the case. So yeah, I'm okay with that. So let me just think, because we're like a layer or two deep. So a sense.
I'm getting W's here. Amazing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's just take a minute and see if it actually pans out when we think about it for a second. So a sense, you want to say that a sense, first of all, you're selecting a specific definition of sense. So someone can go with another definition.
Well, the first definition relates to the human senses, but right? So there's only two definitions here. No, there's more.
Sorry, just 1 second. So there's like a twofold problem. So firstly, you're selecting a definition of sense, and if you try to say this is the only definition that someone can use of sense, then we're going to get back into that, like, what makes a definition correct kind of thing.
Well, we agreed to use the dictionary.
No. We agreed that generally speaking the dictionary is useful, but let's just try to stay on the point. So there's the first problem of you're selecting a specific definition of sense, and it's not clear that exact definition is what's meant when you read sense of personal identity when we talk about gender. Now, the other problem is that granting that definition, we're talking about feelings, right? And we're also assuming a kind of definition of feeling that basically is just the same thing as saying a belief. It's like a propositional attitude that something is true or false. So I guess that what I would want to do is I would want to resist.
So the second definition, just so you know, sorry to interrupt, but the second definition of the word feeling is a belief, especially a vague or irrational one.
Yeah, but when we're specific about these things, like, when you talk.
So this is just the dictionary.
Yeah,
like
you
we're
understand
going
when we
through the dictionary here to like explain what English is.
But you're just playing rhetorical points though. Like, I'm trying to have a real conversation with you. So when we talk about sorry, now see, you threw me off my track. So yeah, we're talking. Okay, yeah. So secondly, so that definition is about feelings, right? And feeling could also cash out differently. Feeling doesn't have to cash out as being just the same thing as a belief, right? But let's just grant that it does under that definition. So I think that the issue that I'm going to want to take is I'm going to want to say sense doesn't have to refer to an explicit belief that something is the case. It can refer to like kind of an impression, or maybe some kind of like emotional attitude or something like that. So I don't see why I should be forced into using a definition of sense that entails explicit belief.
Well, that's what the dictionary is directing us to do. So
that is a definition under a specific interpretation.
Well, I mean, if we look at the definitions of sense and we put it in the context, this is clearly the definition that's being used.
It's really not as clear as you think. You want to say that it's just clear as daylight. How do I?
A feeling that something is the case.
Wait a second.
That's what it says in this context.
Yeah. So
and it's also defined as an awareness or feeling that one is in a specified state. So I like everything that's here is backing up what I'm trying to say, which is that it's an awareness of a conflict that you have inside yourself where you don't see, your identity doesn't match your biology.
Okay, so let's just look at some definitions of sense, because firstly, I think that forcing it to be about well, whatever. We can just go with the dictionary. That's fine. So let's just look through, because we're gonna find definitions here that say something like an impression or some kind of thing like that don't explicitly entail belief. So I don't know. Like, just browse around a dictionary or two if you really want me to do this. Understand, an ability to understand, recognize, value, or react to something, especially any of the five physical abilities: to see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. A general feeling or understanding, right? And we can find definitions of feeling that aren't going to be the same as belief, right? And you're not going to be able to insist we have to use the definition of feeling that means belief. So I'm reluctant to do the dictionary thing, because I think it's kind of like a suckery move, but I do think that in this case you'd be able to reply by saying like, well, like, I mean, they're probably using the dictionary sense of the word, so like, isn't it fair? So that's kind of why I'm humoring it. But yeah, we can easily find definitions of sense.
I think that the Oxford Dictionary uses words in accordance with itself.
I'm looking at the Cambridge Dictionary right now. Right, I'm just pointing out the silliness of getting into an appealing to dictionaries battle, but just forget that for a second, okay? So if we want to do that, here's the Cambridge Dictionary: a general feeling or understanding, right? It's like it took me a few seconds to find a definition that talks about a general feeling, right?
Of sense, right?
Do you want me to? I can screen share again. I turned.
No. I believe you, but why don't you? What is Cambridge? How does Cambridge define feeling?
It only takes a second. It's on the screen, so it's right there. Cambridge defines feeling. Well, again, it's not clear why we have to play inter. Is it inter or intra? Yeah, we don't have to play dictionarily. We could play intra.
Well,
we could play.
Well, I'm using Oxford, so that's why I have to ask.
We can play intra dictionarily, right? So even if, which I don't think this will happen, but even if when I look at this, all of the definitions of feeling talk about beliefs, which I highly doubt is going to happen. I highly doubt it, right? Even if that happens, I'm preempting the gotcha that you're going to try to deliver by saying, okay, well, we can just play intra dictionarily, right? Or interstellar. Fuck, I'm using those wrong. But the point is, we can
know
use
what you're trying to say.
Right. We don't have to be confined to one dictionary.
Yeah.
Feeling. The fact or feeling of something physical. I had a tingling in my feet. I have the strange feeling in my stomach. So it seems kind of like talking about kind of like sensations or something there. Emotion is one of the definitions. Sorry, I
Sure.
didn't mean to laugh, but it's kind of funny. Emotion, it's right there.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, opinion. So opinion, I would grant you, that's propositional, right? An opinion is that something is the case, right? So that
Right.
whenever it's about something being the case, it's propositional, and I'm comfortable calling it a belief. So if we're totally fair here, can you please agree that it's not obvious, it's not entailed by saying someone has a certain sense that they have an explicit belief? It can be a kind of feeling, can be a sensation, can be something like this.
Um,
And fuck you for suckering me into this stupid fucking dictionary battle anyway. Like I won it, but I shouldn't have done it. I couldn't think of the clear enough reason not to do it on the spot, so I was like, fuck, I'll just do this stupid thing. But can you concede that I mean, come on.
the way it reads to me is pretty clear that there's an awareness.
Awareness that's not necessarily propositional. You're trying to say it has to be it doesn't have to be propositional. I understand this is like the linchpin. This is like,
well, I'm taking it from the context of the whole definition, right?
But it's clear that there are definitions.
Like do you think they're talking about emotions in this definition of transgender? That they're saying that a person whose emotions of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex?
I actually would not be surprised at all if that is the case. But the point is just that it's not actually entailed logically by that statement. Given the definitions available, right? There's not actually a necessary entailment. That it's about that it's propositional, right?
Does it matter? Let's
could be surrounding things that are propositional.
Let's suppose, for the sake of argument,
could I just say something else to paint a picture here? There could be surrounding things that are propositional, right? So you could have like a trans kid who knows they're like, a boy, like a male. I don't care about the fucking PC language, but it's whichever one refers to a biological man. Okay, that's what this person is, and they're they have knowledge, if you want to say knowledge, or beliefs about things like, I like to wear a dress, or I like to talk in this particular way or express myself in this way. Those are all propositional things, right? But it's not clear that first of all, they don't technically need to even have those things, judging by the definition. But you could even grant that the point is just, you could grant that there's a bunch of stuff that is...
They're not transgender unless they have a sense of a different identity. That's the definition. They wouldn't be transgender.
Please let me finish. I'm trying to throw you over now. So
okay.
I'm just saying, so my initial point was just saying, obviously sense doesn't have to be propositional. They don't have to have an explicit belief that they are of a certain gender to be transgender. But I was just granting you, there could be say that it's someone who's a kid, they don't know they're trans, but they do have actually there is a ton of like beliefs they have, right? Stuff that is propositional. That's kind of like orbiting around, like maybe they know that they like wearing dresses or they like being a certain way. So that's totally possible also. And in fact, I'll add, you'll find plenty of trans people who will tell you that's the case, right? They'll tell you, if you explain this language, you tell them what beliefs are, propositional attitudes, you get into this, they'll tell you things like, yeah, well, I knew when I was young that I liked, wearing dresses, I like this, I like this. I didn't actually know that I was trans till I was older. So there was that proposition, they didn't have knowledge of that proposition, I'm trans. They nonetheless were trans. So.
Well, they weren't trans. They got convinced of a delusion.
Wait, but you're begging the question by calling. Oh, 1 second. You're begging the question when you call it a delusion, because that's like the whole thing in question, right?
Yeah, no, I know that. Well, that's the thing. Like it's kind of a tautology, but like transgenderism is a delusion by definition. So tautology. As soon as you believe you're trans, you're delusional.
Oh, you're so funny. Well, okay, I was trying to throw you a bone, but I don't think you really appreciate it. I think you thought I was making a point.
Can I ask you this? Like, before we spend another 30 minutes arguing about the dictionary, does it matter? Does it matter?
Can we do what we've done the whole time? Can we do what we've done with all the others, which I've appreciated, which is closed off one topic before moving to the next one? So just to be clear, you understand that it's not necessarily entailed in the definition of gender, right? That one has an explicit belief about their gender. And when you try to appeal to sense, right? It is
entailed in sense of identity. It is.
It's not, though. Their sense doesn't have to be propositional, IHIP.
But this is where we disagree then.
But there's clearly definitions of sense that aren't propositional.
But that's not what's being used here in this context.
But now you're just insisting on what's being used. How are you determining what's being used?
With reason and rationality.
What the fuck does that mean? Come on. What's that supposed to mean? You're just assuming, right? What determines what sense is being used, right? Is it the author's intention? Is it your intention? Right? The whole thing is, it's very hard to argue this is what it must mean. So when there's all these plausible interpretations, you're pretty fucked for ruling them out.
I don't find the other interpretations plausible, I guess. I guess that's the issue.
Well, but but I don't care if you don't find it plausible, right? We're trying to understand, if we back this way up, you want the initial topic that we're getting into here. We moved on from, is it a delusion according to my definition? Now you're saying it's important we agree about a definition, and you're trying to motivate me to agree to your definition. I think that's what we're doing, right? Whatever, it's late. Now, it doesn't look to me like your definition has that it's at all entailed that it has to be propositional. That someone has a belief that they are of a different gender. Now, you're just saying it doesn't look plausible to you that when we look at the definition of gender and it uses the word sense, that sense refers to something non-propositional.
Yeah, because what you're trying to say, that sense could mean emotion in this context? I don't even understand what is your example.
Or what was the exact definition?
An emotion of personal identity?
If in case you're going to try to snipe me for words after, let's just look at the dictionary again, right? A general feeling, right? I'm fine with that. It could easily mean a general feeling.
Yeah, but so a general feeling again implies awareness strongly.
But feeling, when we looked at the definition of that, there's things like emotion, right? Which are not, it doesn't have to be propositional. It doesn't have to be, well, I shouldn't say propositional. It doesn't have to be a propositional attitude of truth or falsity about something, an emotion, right? When I say, I like IHIP or something like this. Well, that is that is propositional. But me liking IHIP, right? That doesn't entail that I have some belief about it or something like that. It's just I have a particular kind of emotion towards you.
I don't understand how you can have an emotion of personal identity. That doesn't jive with me.
So I think that the kind of thing we'd be talking about is you would feel a kind of emotional affinity for certain, I don't know if it would be like thought patterns or ways of you might like being referred to in a certain way or treated a certain way that's kind of gendered, right? Or you might I always want to say expressing, but I know people want to categorize that differently. Or you might feel most comfortable when you're being treated the way that a female would be treated, right? That kind of comfort, that's all emotional, right? That's there's no reason why that can't be what we're talking about, why that can't qualify, right, as a sense.
Okay, listen, man, I'm gonna have to tap out because it's late, and I appreciate that you're being civil and having a conversation with me. Honestly, this was a lot better than I expected it was going to be, but it's also taking a lot.
I'm always civil if you don't dodge. 100%.
It's also taking a lot longer than I thought it would, and I have to tap out. Maybe we can come back to it at some other point.
Yeah, we can pick it up anytime.
Maybe people can sound off in the comments who they agree with on the concept of what sense means in this context. And then we can pick it up.
I think there's a bunch of people who would be philosophically illiterate, right? Which is not to say I'm some big fucking philosophy guy, but I know some basics, right? And they're not going to be able to understand a lot of like what's being talked about there. So not super confident about the comment section. But like just in summation, okay? So we agreed that by my definition, there's no entailment that you're delusional if you're trans. So anyone who thinks transgender just means you have a gender and sex that differ, which I would assume is, probably most people who've like looked into this. Well, according to your definition, IHIP does not think that transgender people have to be delusional. Now, on the second question about whether we should use one definition or the other, well, wait, now I'm getting lost in all the questions, so I'll just address the last one. The final one about when gender talks about sense of personal identity, the idea that sense has to be like a attitude towards a proposition that it's true or false, right? That's just obviously not the case. You look at sense, there's definitions in here like general feeling. You look at what feeling means, there's stuff like emotion, right? We can just be talking about a general kind of emotional affinity for certain modes of being, certain ways of being
No, because the whole phrase is sense of personal identity.
I'm summing up my position. You can
okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine. So yeah, so when we look at gender, it uses the word sense. When we look at the word sense, it can refer to things like feeling, right? It doesn't have to be propositional. And when we look at feeling obviously doesn't have to be an attitude towards a proposition that it's true or false. We can look it up. It can be things like emotions, right? So we can simply be talking about someone who has a kind of emotional affinity for a certain way of being, treated, a certain way of, maybe like conceptualizing themselves or, something like this. So you can have, when you're a kid, someone who's trans, we were just talking about someone who, you could have someone who's there are trans people who will tell you this is the case for them. That they were, young, they didn't have an explicit belief that they're trans. They had some propositional content, like I like wearing dresses or something like this. They just had a general kind of emotional affinity for that gendered way of being, and the explicit belief came later. So the explicit belief is not required in order to be trans. And finally, even if I grant all of this stuff that I've given LP such a hard time about here, and we say, okay, gender entails that you have a belief that you are that gender. Sure, we're gonna lose a certain thing. You won't be able to say that you can be trans and not believe that you're trans or something like that. Sure, but we still are gonna have a further problem of why would that make someone delusional? I don't think the trans people who do have a belief about their gender are delusional. So there will be a further problem even if we grant all the crazy rabbit holes about sense, which didn't pan out. So yeah, you can have the last word, and we can pick up anytime.
So I'll just say this. One of my first red herrings that we left on the table was when I said that your definition is meaningless, being that a sex and gender different. And I would really want to press you on that sometime when we have the time. And not to like be rude or impugn you or cast like your motivations on you here, but I feel like the reason we spend 40 minutes talking about the dictionary today is because you're kind of scared of having that part of the conversation where you have to define gender and explain how you could tell whether or not somebody's gender is actually different from their sex. But I don't have time to go into it today, but I hope to, at some point, that we get to actually have that conversation. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, well, I could reply to that, but I will restrain myself from doing so. Yeah, well, you can reach me here whenever. I appreciate the cordial conversation. I'm always happy to be cordial, assuming certain rules are played by. And yeah, have a good night. I hope I can eventually bring you around on this. Keep well, LP.
All right, man, you too. Bye.
Bye. Well, I guess that's going to be the end of the conversation with Hypocrite for now. Maybe we can follow up. More productive than usual. Still going for some kind of slimy gotchas, but we can let it slide. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, ask them down below. And that's all. Bye bye.